Our guest now is Colonel Jon Sweet, retired military intelligence officer. Good evening.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having me on.
So, sir, we were just discussing this new mobilization bill, right? Do you think it will have an impact? Will that impact be positive, or perhaps to the contrary? Will people, try and find ways of avoiding this conscription?
Well, look, I think the conscription is going to have an impact, but it's going to be a delayed impact because it's not just a matter of putting soldiers in uniforms. It's a matter of putting soldiers in uniforms and training them on how to fight, training them on weapon systems, individual weapons that they'll be working with, or possibly the tanks and artillery that they'll be assigned to. So it's a long process. I think it's the right step, obviously, for Ukraine right now. They're vastly outmanned. Russia continues to literally throw soldiers at them every day. Soldiers, tanks, armored personnel carriers, and it is depleting the ranks, and they need to fill them again.
Right, but you mentioned training, equipping soldiers with uniforms and so on, but I'm also wondering about morale because, all those who wanted to fight for Ukraine are already out there on front lines, and now you'll have a reluctant army, right? I mean, the army of rather reluctant driftees. So could such an army, stop Russians from advancing?
Yeah, that's always a hazard with conscription as far as getting disgruntled citizens into your ranks. But I think the majority of the soldiers, and again, the age has been obviously dropped from 27 to 25, so you do have a younger base. But I believe that the loyalty to the country and wanting to defend the country will rise up. But look, it's difficult times and hard decisions are being made. And the president there is asking his citizens to step up and to continue to fight. And of course, as I said, right now there's nothing in the provision that allows soldiers that have been on the front lines for the past 2 years to demobilize. So that also can have some play. But again, I don't think it would be as much as you may be hearing through Russian propaganda that there's an issue within the ranks. I think the majority of Ukraine citizens want to defend their country. They're not interested in living underneath Russian rule again.
Right. So let me ask you about funding, because, I mean, it's safe to say that the U.S. considers itself an ally of both Israel and Ukraine. So why is it so proactive in, sending arms to Israel and so reluctant with, sending that $60 billion to Ukraine? What has happened over the last several months that, this deal got stuck?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that. It's come down to politics. Initially, back in November, where one side of the government was concerned that we're having issues on the border and it wasn't being properly addressed by the other side of the government, and that they used Ukraine as a tool in order to negotiate. Look, we're 6 months into that now. Hopefully we're beyond that, and that this vote that comes up either sometime this week for $49 billion will go through. We can start seeing the funding go through, but there would be lag time from the time in which the funding is approved to the time in which the weapons are secured and brought into the country. So there's still going to be shortages, unfortunately, in Ukraine for the foreseeable future until that lag time's caught up.
But then why split this, right? I mean, why is Mike Johnson splitting the funding for Israel and funding for Ukraine? I mean, it doesn't look good, right?
It doesn't have a good look for the United States. You're correct. I'm not sure exactly why he's splitting it. But there's obviously different concerns and different issues with each one of the packages, okay? You have 4 packages. You have Ukraine, you have Taiwan, you have Israel, and you have the southern border. And he's dividing those packages up into separate issues. Separate funds of money. And I think possibly because he knows that one group's not going to vote in a certain manner in which he needs to vote. And if he bundles them all together, it may not go through. But it's trying times, and it's obviously very difficult for everyone that's involved, both in Ukraine and Israel, but also the southern border states too. So it'd be nice if Washington could come together and get this funding through, so Ukraine could fight off the relentless artillery assaults or infantry assaults in the era of bombardments that they've undergone for the past several weeks.
I'm wondering whether it's not all too late. Now we have the the grand mobilization in Ukraine. We have talks of the possible support from the US. We have trenches being dug in Ukraine, but isn't it all too late? Isn't it that the reluctance of the West to help Ukraine some months ago, proven that Europe or the West is not able to react as it should in times of need?
I'm not sure it's too late, but it's getting close. I believe Ukraine's about the same situation they were 12 months ago with Bakhmut. They were defending, they were holding the lines. At the same time, they were building combat power in order to initiate their counteroffensive. They don't quite have that same scenario, but they are executing a mobile defense. They are training Russian forces that are coming in. But right now, they desperately need that funding and that artillery to stop the bleeding. And the bleeding is the relentless assaults that are hitting them in the front lines. The other thing they also need, in addition to the artillery, is they need the ability to attrit, the ability to interdict the forces that are coming from Russia into Ukraine. You can't keep fighting those forces in Ukraine. You have to defeat them before they arrive. And they need those weapon systems. They need those HIMARS. They need the additional ATACMS and cluster munitions and F-16s for close air support. Remember, this is a combined arms fight. And the longer you wait, and you're correct, the longer you wait, the more time the Russians have to dig defensive positions in depth. So a counterattack will be largely unsuccessful or bloody.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, on the other hand, France is asking Russia not to attack Ukraine during the Olympic Games, but I don't think they will be listened to. Now, lastly, I'd like to still ask you about the mobilization, because you mentioned the battle for Bakhmut. And I remember that one of the main actors during this battle was the Wagner Group, the famous Wagner Group. Now, this new mobilization bill says also something about inmates being drawn to the army. Do you think that's a right move by Ukraine?
Yeah, well, I believe when I went through the notes concerning the provision, there was a provision in there that would allow prisoners to have reduced sentences if they served for the Ukrainian military. Look, that's always going to be a hazard by putting folks like that. I'm not sure it doesn't say they're violent criminals, as in murderers or rape, but it does say criminals. So they are reaching in, obviously, to the pool of applicants that are available to fill those positions that are vacated. It could have an impact on morale within the ranks, but again, these are Ukrainian citizens, and I think Ukraine's going to rise up to the task.
Well, it's always better to. Well, it's never a good thing, but sometimes soldiers become criminals, but criminals becoming soldiers, that's not the way it should be. I guess desperate times need desperate measures. Colonel Jon Sweet, retired military intelligence officer, was our guest tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me on.